Okay, so now we need to add some text to our video. So in week 9, I provided this step-by-step PDF document that outlines every little step that we did. This is in text instead of in video form. So you could follow this as well if you're reading along with these videos. If you take a look at number 4, that is the quote that we are using in order to create this quote. So, or this video. So we are going to highlight this text right here. Life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around once in a while, you'll miss it. So what I'm going to grab is life moves pretty fast. That's going to be the first part of this quote I'm going to grab. And I'm going to copy that and I'm going to go back into Photoshop, and now I need to add text. If I click on the text tool and click anywhere on one of these images right now, and I actually want to move my key timeline here, I'm going to move it so that Life Movie disappears, drag it over, and stop. So this is where I'm going to add my text. If I click on the text tool right now, do you know what it's going to do? It's going to do something really silly, but it's what it's meant to do. It's going to add that text layer at the end. That is not what I want. What I want to do is I want the text to run over top of my video. So how am I going to do that? Well, this is where, see where you have video group? You can now, instead of add media, you can actually create a new video group. That's going to layer itself on top of these video clips. So now that I have video group 2 chosen, and you can name all of these just like you can layers. Now when I click on type on the top, there we go. Now it fits on the top, and I'm going to paste in Life Moves Pretty Fast, and with my move tool, I'm going to move that into place. Now if I use Control T, I can manipulate my text as if it were an object on a layer. So I can grab a corner anchor point, hold Shift to keep it in proportion, and there we go. Life moves pretty fast. Now this is kind of hard to read, so if I really want it to be legible, there's something I could do. I could use black, but then we have black here. I could use another color, but what I could do, because it's also a layers property, it's not just in the timeline, but it's also a layer property. So if I double click that, I can actually add a drop shadow. There we go. Now I can read underneath that text. And if I go in here, I can move the distance of that a little bit, so I can almost match it up with the clock itself. So it looks a little bit more realistic here. And I can change the size a little bit to smooth that out. And if I click OK, well, that's so much more legible than it was before. So if I turn off that drop shadow here, it's an effect. You can't really read Life Moves Pretty Fast, but if you add a drop shadow by, again, double clicking on the layer to reveal layer styles and choosing drop shadow, you can add some good drop shadows behind it in order to create more contrast. And now the contrast principle makes it easy for us to read the text easier. Now, I also don't want Life Moves Pretty Fast to run into there. As default, when you create a new video group, it actually goes poof right to the end. So we've lined up our key line exactly where we want the text to start. So let's move it over. And I'm going to move this back. There we go. Now I can move on to the next one. So let's see what happens when this moves over. Not too bad. Maybe my overlap here, right click, crossfade, maybe I move that over just a little bit more. Right, as soon as life disappears, now I can move my text over to line up with that, and I'll line up my text with the end of my clip. Now I'm ready to move on to the next one. So back to my Word doc, or sorry, my PDF, I believe. Did I close that off? Maybe I did. Yep. All right, so I closed it off. Good thing I know the quote off by heart because it's my favorite quote of all time. go. Whoops. All right, so what I'm going to do is continue, and I'm going to add another slide. So, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to move my key over into the next position, and maybe I should fade the text in instead of it just popping in. Good thing I have this awesome thing called these fades in here. These are transitions. I'm going to fade that in, add it to the beginning. That might be, is that too long a fade? Right click, 1 second, nope. And I'll fade that right back out by drag and dropping that on the end. Excellent. So now let's move on to the next one. So it'll fade in, lovely, and it'll fade out. And as soon as it stops, I'm going to start my next text, line of text. So text tool. This time it's, so life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop, now, what I can do, let's see, what size is life moves pretty fast? Maybe, you know what I can do? If we don't want to retype it, why don't we just right click and duplicate the layer? This one is going to be life moves pretty fast if you don't stop. Now, I'll probably still have to type that in physically, but it's renamed that layer. And there you go. So let's say we'll move over. Oh, we've just saved ourselves some time by duplicating the layer. So if you don't stop. And this way, the nice thing about this is now everything's consistent and the same. There's your repetition principle in action. And I'm going to move along here and lengthen this to there. And I'm going to keep doing that over and over and over again. So right click on the layer, duplicate the layer. So if you don't stop and look around, and I'll just move along here on my clips. If you don't stop, I need my text tool. If you don't stop and look around, maybe I'll put those 3 dots at the beginning too. This is just style, so don't worry about that. And look around. Or move on to the next one. What are we going to do? Now all the effects are the same, the type size is the same, everything's the same. Right click, duplicate layer. So if you don't stop and look around once in a while, comma. All right, so we'll move that over. Text tool, highlight your text. Once in a while, comma. Sorry, I'm baking cookies. It's a little, that's what the buzzer is in the background, sorry. Once in a while. And moving on. One last time, right click on the layer, duplicate layer, you'll miss it. End quote. All right. We'll move that along. Text tool. You'll miss it. Now, this time, I'm going to move that down to the bottom. Alrighty. I'm burning my cookies. All right, there we go. So if we play that from the beginning, it's going to look pretty darn good. So the last thing I'm going to do in the last video, so we end here, we've added text. We've duplicated the text layers after we added some double clicking on the layer, adding a drop shadow so it was easier to read. And by duplicating the layer, you now have an excellent use of repetition, alignment. Think about that as well. Great contrast. So you've got 3 design principles working really, really well here. And they're in proximity to each different visual clip of the film. So in our next video, how to render and save.